Call me on my cell phone. Late night when you need my love. Call me on my cell phone. Late night when you need my. Hello, and welcome back to Historical Inquire podcast for advancement in the social field, a podcast made by and for the most distinguished of ex-convicts. I am your host, Quandavius Bingleton, and in today's episode, we're going to be speaking to an extremely important special guest, Commander of the Continental Army and the first President of the United States, George Washington. Before we start talking to our special guest, I'd like to introduce a few fun facts about him to get you acquainted with him. First of all, Washington did not actually have wooden teeth, but rather, most of his teeth were made from ivory, and in fact, some of his teeth actually came from poor people and from enslaved workers. At the age of 11, Washington was forced to be removed from school due to the death of his father, and afterwards, his mother assigned him the duties of taking care of his family and of taking care of the family's tobacco farm. Washington is also known for having caused a small skirmish in the Ohio Valley that would eventually become the French and Indian War, a smaller war inside the larger 7 Years' War. Washington served as major in the militia in the colony of Virginia prior to leading the rebels in the Revolutionary War. After the Revolutionary War, George did not actually want to serve as first president of the United States, but he was more so convinced into the presidency by his peers and the populace. Finally, in 1798, George Washington was called as commander-in-chief again in order to lead the military, as the United States prepared for war with France due to the tensions caused by the Quasi-War. Without further ado, I am happy to introduce you to our special guest, George Washington.
Greetings.
So, Washington, to begin with, I'd like to ask about your religious affiliation. In particular, what religious denomination of Christianity are you a part of?
Since I was born in Virginia, the state religion at the time followed the Anglican Church. And in fact, my great grandfather was actually a pastor of said church. Not only this, but in order to hold office in colonial era Virginia, it was required for me to follow the Anglican Church. So it made sense for me to follow that as my main Christian denomination. I'm often private with my religious beliefs and prayers, but I do attend church services whenever possible.
Very interesting. I want to ask now, what is your favorite aspect of the modern United States?
I'm very pleased with the Constitution and how it has withstood the test of time, and I'm also very pleased with the religious dedication that many Americans have, especially compared to the secularization of modern era Europe. However, I find it very disturbing the effect of political parties have on this country. They have infiltrated the branches of government, and I find the sheer size of the government to be too large, as the powers of the federal government have far extended what they should have.
I have to agree with some of those points. Now, what is your favorite American invention, and why do you believe so?
I would say the greatest example of American exceptionalism and ingenuity would be the airplane and the modern aircraft that derived from it. The airplane allows the American populace to explore this great nation in a manner that allows them to see God's creation in a grandiose manner.
Are you content with the legacy and things you left behind? Are there things you wish you could have done, or regrets you wish you could eradicate?
I wish I had incorporated more anti political party writing into the founding documents of this country, so that people vote for individual politicians because of the policy that they want to create, rather than party affiliation. As for my life, I felt I have fulfilled God's plan for me as an individual and have completed my spiritual enlightenment.
Well, final question for this episode. What do you believe are 4 qualities that every leader should have in order to be successful?
I believe that leaders should have individual discipline in order to keep themselves under control and keep them from abusing power. Morality to ensure that they have good values and that they're leading in the correct and just manner, and the worship of God. These things are imperative to the persona of a great and competent leader.
Well, that's all I have for today. Thanks so much for joining us, George. We'll have to partake in another conversation sooner or later. We'll be back next week to interview another special guest, Napoleon Bonaparte himself, to ask him about military strategy and to possibly convince him to conquer Europe yet again. This interview might get extremely violent if it gets out of hand. We'll see you fine ladies and gentlemen next week. Thank you for listening.